All right, so I will share my screen. Infinite mirror for a second, and then into the tutorial. So basically your starting point to using UMA is to go to uma.xyz or umaproject.org and then click on our docs pages. It'll take you to this page here, and then you want to go to developers getting started. And this will bring you to our quick start tutorial. It's basically going to explain the primary integration point to the UMA ecosystem. It's the optimistic oracle. And this is a system for getting any kind of arbitrary, publicly verifiable data into your smart contracts. So that could be data about something else going on the same chain. It could be data about the real world. It could be some cross-chain data, off-chain calculation, you name it. And this is just like a 3-minute kind of thing using Remix, where you can deploy a contract to a testnet that interacts with our testnet version of the Oracle. And then you can propose answers to a question that that contract is going to ask. So in this case, it's a really simple question. It was asking about the temperature in New York City on July 25th, 2022, whether it exceeded a certain value. If yes, you answer 1 or 1 with 18 decimal places. If no, you answer 0. So really straightforward, but what's really powerful about this is that you're able to ask these natural language questions, and you're only relying on one online, honest proposer disputer to be there to answer that question. You don't need a whole node network for any question that you want to ask, which is really important for securing the actual answer that you're going to receive. It's also important for the flexibility of what you can build using an Oracle system. So let's go to the requesting data part. So we'll open up this example contract on Remix, and some preliminary stuff before doing this. You would go into MetaMask and check your Gurley ETH balance, make sure you're on the Gurley test network. You do need to have a browser wallet. So in this case, I'm using MetaMask, but you could use a different one. And you do need to have some Gurley ETH. So you could go to a Gurley ETH faucet to go and get that. So if you just Google Gurley ETH faucet, you can get some. Or contact any of the UMA people. We'd be happy to send you some. For this one is we have some tutorials that are more command line focused, and you can go deeper into the docs to find that. But we want to give you something that you can actually deploy and interact with a real contract on a test net, but only in the browser. So you don't actually have to install anything. You don't have to install all of our NPM packages or anything like that. So this is a really simple contract. It is less than 50 lines. It's mostly comments, but it's going to show you the really basic flow of interacting with the deployed optimistic Oracle contract, and then creating a request for some data, and then settling it, and then getting the settled value. So in Remix, it's going to automatically compile it once you open this file, and then you can deploy it going here. And for your environment, in this case, I'm going to select the injected provider of MetaMask, which is going to deploy it to Gurley. Make sure that you are on Gurley, otherwise you could actually deploy this, I think, to a live network and spend real money. Just the money is fake, and you're able to interact with our testnet Oracle interface really easily. If you wanted to make a real request on a real live network, it's going to involve a lot of costs. I mean, not just the gas cost, but you're going to need actual real money for proposer bonds and things like that. And there's also a risk that you might be asking a weird question, and other people are going to be interacting with it because it's on a live network, and there are going to be real economic incentives in play. So you don't want to do that right out of the gate.
Cool, thanks.
So for this, I'll deploy, and I will confirm in MetaMask. And you can see this here, and you can take a look at this transaction on Etherscan if you want. But basically, once this is finished, we're going to be able to interact with it here. Okay, success, confirmed. Wait for Remix's node to pick it up. There we go. All right, so once it's deployed, you should see it down here under deployed contracts. And you should see a couple of functions here. So you can actually call these functions within Remix. One step that I didn't walk through is just connecting your wallet to Remix, because this was already done, but it should be hopefully not too difficult. If you're just clicking the Remix link, you should see an option to connect your wallet, which you're going to have to do. If you want to ask a different question, you could change it here, which won't really make much of a difference in this case because it's like a testnet thing and you're going to be the only one responding to your own requests anyway. But you could edit that. But you could also use this as a base to build more complex contracts. So you could change the identifier to something more sophisticated. Once you get the settled price, you could do something with it. Right now, all this function does is it returns the value that is returned by the Oracle system. But you could actually use that value to do some payout function, for instance, or like store it or change something in your configuration. Like whatever it is that you're actually using the Oracle for, you can actually do that here when you're getting the settled price. And if you want to get really advanced with it, you could dig deeper into the docs and you could add callback functions to this contract where instead of having to call this get settled price thing, once the settlement happens, you could automatically trigger whatever it is that you want to have happen. I'm going to request a price from the Oracle. So you can see that happening here. It's requesting a price pending. And what this is going to do is it's going to request a piece of data. So a lot of the terminology within UMA's smart contracts are around prices, which is kind of a callback to the original applications for DeFi. But a lot of the data we're actually dealing with now is not price related at all. It's just data. So you could think of request price as being request data. In this case, the data is related to the weather. So now that that is settled, we should be able to move forward and look at this in the actual Oracle interface. So here we'll go to testnet.oracle.umaproject.org, and we'll connect our wallet. And we can see this question coming in here. And we can actually respond to it. And this is open to anybody. And this is the way that it works for the actual mainnet requests as well, that anybody can respond to any request and anybody can dispute any proposal. So it's a fully open and permissionless system. And you don't need to have specified nodes that are responding. You don't need to have a validator network that's responding. You just need one honest party. And then any disputes get escalated to a vote of all of the UMA token holders. So in this case, we're just going to propose an answer of 0, which is correct if you go and check like what the temperature actually was in New York on that day. It did not go above that level. And we'll submit that proposal. Confirm that here. And while we're waiting for that transaction to get validated, we are going to go over here and just kind of look at what's actually happening in this request. So one thing that we do when we make the request is we're setting the liveness to 30 seconds. The reason is that this is a testnet request. In real life, this would typically be 2 hours or more. Generally speaking, people don't go less than 2 hours. You can, obviously, we're doing it here. But just for security reasons, to give disputers time to identify bad proposals and dispute them, usually people keep it at 2 hours or longer. If you have some kind of complex question where it's unclear whether you should dispute or not, or if you have some very large amount of funds that are at risk if there's a bad proposal, you might want to make that even longer than 2 hours. And just think about what the user experience effects would actually be for something like that. So we made that proposal. I talked too much on the remix thing, so you didn't see the countdown timer, but basically it was counting down the 30 seconds that you would have to dispute. Because nobody disputed it, we're able to actually settle it. And in this case, we provide a convenience function here for settling the request. You can also settle directly to the Oracle contract. And this function from the contract we deployed is just a wrapper for that Oracle settlement contract where it's saying, look for this particular request. It's a request that came from this address, the getting started contract. It has this identifier. It was requested at this request time, which was set here when we requested the data. And then it has this ancillary data, which is set here, which is the question that we were asking. So it's possible to settle this because there was no dispute that came in during the challenge window. So you could settle this from all kinds of different angles. You could go to Etherscan to settle it. You could call the contract directly. You could call it with a bot, which you would do if you were making lots and lots of requests, lots of proposals that have to be settled. There's no reason not to do that automatically if you know that it's reached a point where it can be settled because it hasn't been challenged within the challenge window. Or if it has been challenged, it's been resolved by the DVM. And so you can go ahead and settle it. And then once you settle it, in this case, we have a function to just get the settled price, which doesn't really do anything with it. It just kind of returns it so you can see the value, which you can see here. But typically what you're going to do here is all the interesting stuff. So you're going to the Oracle for a reason. You want to get this data and you want to do something with it. So all of the interesting stuff will happen in some kind of a callback function or a function that is going to rely on that settled value from the Oracle. When you get the resolved value, or it's called the resolved price, just kind of a throwback to the DeFi focus days, you're able to use that value, in this case 0, to, for instance, if this was a prediction market, you might be paying out one party versus another based on what actually happened in the real world. If this was an insurance contract, for instance, if you're very sensitive to the price of would actually have a really big effect on your business, you might want to have some kind of insurance contract tied to the temperature. So that payout function could happen here. In other cases, it might be something like you want to provide access to some kind of Ethereum on-chain thing to people that held a particular Solana NFT, which is kind of weird because there's no native messaging function between Solana and Ethereum, but UMA handles that super easily. You could ask, does this person on their Ethereum address that they've identified publicly somewhere hold this particular type of Solana NFT? If yes, do this. If no, do this other thing. So it really depends on your use case and what you're trying to build. So when you're deploying this contract, you're relying on the optimistic Oracle contract, which is already deployed. So in this case, you're pulling it here. It's just kind of the hard-coded value for its address on Gurley. In actual production, you'd probably use our Finder contract to track this down on whatever chain you're deploying on, find the actual optimistic Oracle contract. But other than that, no, you don't necessarily have to have another contract to deal with the value that you're getting back from the Oracle. You could do it all within this contract. So in here, you could say like, okay, return this, but before that, like, you know, do all the interesting stuff. So this is where all the action happens once you get the value. There is also a lot that goes into framing the question. So you might have some more sophisticated question than this, especially if you're trying to build a protocol on top of UMA. Your question might require a brand new identifier. You can't lean on something like yes or no query. Like you need to specify a lot of details, in which case you can pass that through UMA governance saying, here's how we want to resolve these types of questions because we're building this particular type of smart contract system that needs external data. You can actually have your contract respond to questions that are being asked by other contracts. For instance, you could build a callback function into your contract that is tied to like a particular like type of question. I'll do some like quick recoding here. So I'll get rid of this ancillary data. I'll say that this is request price and it's going to take a bytes ancillary data argument. And then we're going to say ancillary data is ancillary data. So you might do something like this, and now you have this parameter that you're passing into request price. And now the rest of the flow is exactly the same, except you can change what your question is that you pass into this request price function. So that's kind of a really simple way to modify it. And so then with this, you could add some extra stuff. Right now, this is public, which means anybody can use this contract to ask a question. You might want to do something like, you know, like a only owner thing, or whatever kind of restriction that you want. You could add some requirements within the function that it come from a particular contract in your system or set of contracts, whatever it is that you need to do. But this right here would actually work out of the box. It's just that you need to be able to compose this, you know, out of band and then pass it in. You could do like, you know, number 1, number 2, number 3 of your interesting things, and then you're done. And if it is really simple, I don't see a reason to not just keep it all in one contract. But you absolutely could move it somewhere else, though. I think it's important to remember how flexible UMA is. So feel free to play around with this contract, expand it. You can do a lot once you start expanding, you know, this sort of thing where you're doing your interesting things with it. The main areas I would focus on are maybe not necessarily the price request part. Like, this is pretty basic, you know, this is fine for testing purposes. But I would focus on what is the question that you're actually asking, which is currently set to here. You know, what data do you want? That's all in here. That's one area of complexity. And then when you get the data, what do you do with it? So I would just focus in those 2 areas, and the rest of it, you can just kind of keep this as boilerplate stuff and play around with it on Girly a little bit.